Bullets kept flying, swords clashed, and shields clashed too. Bandits kept attacking again and again. Kent wondered if they'd been raided 5 times already. But Jelaine said it was 6. They managed to take down a few bandits, but many more got away. Qin Tian couldn't believe the bandits had been attacking them non-stop for the past 3 days. Ashbel thought they were so persistent because they were using only one road. If they tried to retreat, they'd just get attacked again the same way. Gaussen suggested they take the lead in hunting down the bandits. Qin Tian wondered if the bandits were working for Dumbledore. Ashbel said they might be, but she told him not to worry because Dumbledore wouldn't openly attack and probably recruited people secretly. Then Qin Tian realized it was a good thing, and Ashbel asked him what he meant. On the other hand, Gaussen was furious. He saw the bandits attacking them with guerrilla tactics and realized they didn't have enough people to easily defeat them. Kent agreed, knowing Gaussen could retaliate against the bandits, but he worried they'd strike again if they hit them hard. Jelaine suggested caution, warning that they didn't know the bandits' true numbers and could fall into traps if they attacked recklessly. Even if they chased the bandits, they lacked the manpower and time to pursue them. Qin Tian empathized with Kent's past struggles, acknowledging that it was even harder now with Dumbledore causing trouble in the name of the royal family. Ashbel advised endurance until they reached Hollowell, where Fred was recruiting soldiers and knights. However, Gaussen reminded them of the challenge of passing Ranner Forest, where the bandits might make a final stand due to the terrain limiting their mobility and defenses. Worried, Kent suggested Qin Tian stay in a nearby village instead of continuing with them. Qin Tian questioned if Kent was reneging on their deal not to pay him. Kent admitted he would suggest abandoning the supplies and fleeing if they couldn't defeat the bandits. Qin Tian joked about being a fast runner and asked not to be blamed if he left. Ashbel asked Kent not to hold it against them if they left him behind. Meanwhile, in Ranner Forest, Zack relaxed while sitting next to William, who was cleaning his sword. Zack grumbled about his men having to work even during the night. William complained about Zack's laziness. Zack suggested that William assign his men to take turns on night watch duty, but William countered by suggesting Zack's men do it instead. In his thoughts, William angrily plotted to eliminate Zack. Back at Kent's camp, Jelaine instructed his soldiers to keep an eye out for enemy attacks and remain alert. Ashbel proposed splitting into 2 groups, one led by Jelaine and one covering the rear. She warned them to watch out for traps along the way. Emphasizing the importance of safeguarding their supplies, she advised the knights not to pursue retreating enemies. Kent then urged Jelaine to prioritize their safety and escape if their lives were in danger. Jelaine knelt down and assured Kent that they were his protectors, pledging to defend his life and honor to the death. The following day, Kent's group continued their journey, with Ashbel stressing that Kent's safety came first. They aimed to cross the forest in 3 hours at their current speed. Suddenly, gunshots sounded out, startling the horses. Gaussen shouted that they were under attack as bandits emerged from the dense woods. Their main targets were Kent and the supplies. Kent's men were caught off guard, unable to reload their guns in time. Just then, Qin Tian came out from the carriage, accompanied by Nick and wielding his sword. The bandits were charging toward the carriages as William eagerly urged them on. Jelaine instructed the knights to protect Kent. William chuckled when he noticed there were only a few knights, and the bandits threw ropes at the knights' heads, including Gelaine's. But Gelaine was strong enough to pull the bandits instead of them pulling him down from his horse. As more and more knights found themselves helpless, Kent ordered them to retreat and leave the supplies behind. Suddenly, Zack appeared, aiming for Kent's neck. Gaussen swiftly defended his master and pushed Zack away. They exchanged blows, and only Zack ended up wounded. While Zack was flustered, Gaussen kept attacking by stabbing. Zack teased him, joking about Gaussen's enthusiasm. Seeing Gaussen struggling, Kent offered to help, but Ashbel stopped him, saying Kent would only get in the way. Kent was unsure what to do as Ashbel advised him to focus on retreating. All of a sudden, Qin Tian stepped forward and stared at Zack, who was goofing around by dodging Gaussen's attacks. Zack admitted that Gaussen was stronger than William, but boasted that he was even stronger and dared Gaussen to face defeat. Luckily, Qin Tian showed up just in time and warned Zack that he would be the one to meet his end. Zack managed to defend against Qin Tian's attack, but was pushed back. Qin Tian apologized to Gaussen for arriving late, explaining that he had been enjoying a peaceful life lately. Zack grumbled about Qin Tian interfering in their duel, calling him ungentlemanly. Qin Tian asked who Zack was, and Gaussen revealed that Zack was the leader of bandits in Dumbledore's territory who had already destroyed 3 villages. Upon hearing this, Qin Tian decided not to feel guilty about turning Zack into fertilizer later. Qin Tian told Zack that he was indeed not a gentleman. Zack was taken aback, as he found dealing with people who didn't act like gentlemen difficult, especially Qin Tian, whom he knew nothing about. He even demanded more payment after murdering him. Qin Tian wondered if Zack was okay with saying such words before his demise. He said he used to hunt many fierce animals in the wild before, and Zack just seemed like an angry cat in comparison, trying to act tough to scare him off. Zack got mad when he realized Qin Tian was strong, and he blamed William and Dumbledore. He threw his axe at Qin Tian, saying he wouldn't play nice either. Zack tried to run, but Qin Tian caught up quickly. Qin Tian punched Zack in the face, complaining about losing sleep from bandits' attacks. Zack quickly spilled the beans that William was behind the attack, saying even if he died, William would keep coming back with others to cause trouble. Meanwhile, Gaussen noticed Kent and Ashbel looking shocked, with their jaws dropping. Kent claimed there was a Valkyrie on the battlefield, referring to Nick skillfully defeating bandits with ease. Everyone was amazed by Nick's strength. Kent looked for Qin Tian, and Gaussen said Qin Tian was chasing Zack. Ashbel told the men to fight, and Kent and Gaussen led the other knights in the battle. The bandits realized they were losing. Behind a tree, William cursed because Zack was missing. He forgot about the current attack and ordered his men to start Plan B. Molotov cocktails were thrown and hit Kent's carriage. Ashbel told the men to put out the fire instead of chasing the attackers, as there were explosives in the carriage. Suddenly, someone ran in and cut the carriage in half. Qin Tian removed the burning part to prevent an explosion. Ashbel told the others to quickly unload the boxes. Qin Tian praised Nick and gave her head pats as a reward. In the end, Kent lost 13 people and 2 knights. He wished he had sold his land to Dumbledore, but Ashbel told him not to talk nonsense. He questioned if Kent wanted his people to live like slaves and starve. Kent disagreed but worried they didn't have enough time after losing their carriage. Then Kent remembered Qin Tian's idea to beat Dumbledore. Qin Tian asked if Kent wanted to go ahead with it since they still had a chance. Kent was surprised. He remembered he was a captain and navigator, and the front line was in the north where the northwest wind blew. Kent worried it would also take time to travel by sea and feared pirates. Qin Tian suggested they fly, leaving the others shocked. They thought Qin Tian was just tired. Qin Tian explained a hot air balloon idea. He said it might take time to prepare, but if all went well, they would be flying soon. They didn't have any materials or tools to make the hot air balloon. They had to hurry to the nearest town, Harrowell. On the way, Kent was surprised to learn that Qin Tian and Nick were warriors. Qin Tian reminded him that they always carried weapons. Kent had thought they were just for dissecting hunted animals. It didn't take them long to reach Harrowell, where Kent's guild's industries were located. They entered a store, and an old woman was surprised to see Kent since she had expected them to arrive in the afternoon. Kent introduced her as Aunt Noma to Qin Tian. He then asked if they had enough fabric. Noma said they had 30 yards left, but Kent exclaimed that they needed more than 100 yards of it. Kent said he would buy anything else available in town, and Noma agreed, advising them to rest first. While the group rested, Qin Tian drafted plans for a hot air balloon, outlining its 3 main parts: the envelope, the burner, and the basket. Creating the basket seemed straightforward, but shaping the envelope into a sphere posed a challenge. The burner was the most crucial component, yet they lacked propane or natural gas to fuel it. As a solution, Qin Tian decided to design a simplified version of a rocket stove. Shortly after, Noma announced they had acquired the fabric, which would arrive by afternoon. Qin Tian then asked her for another favor, to locate tailors, blacksmiths, and the items on his list. Noma confirmed they had everything in stock and inquired about the requirements for the tailors and blacksmiths. Qin Tian simply requested skilled individuals. Kent expressed concern about obtaining everything quickly, but Qin Tian reassured him. He had already planned the entire process, intending to have the blacksmiths work on the burner parts simultaneously. Afterwards, Noma showed all the things they'd gathered and introduced some knights and rangers she'd recruited to accompany them back. Qin Tian was surprised that they could hire knights. Ashbel corrected him, saying they couldn't hire knights from noble families, but instead they had hired mercenaries who called themselves knights. Noma wished them luck as Kent's group departed. On the journey, Gaussen and Ashbel were worried because they only had 4 days left. Kent reassured them, telling them to do whatever they could, even if they delivered late. They met up with Jelaine and the knights. They prepared the basket, and Qin Tian explained that they shouldn't exceed a certain weight to keep the balloons flying. After setting up the balloons, Kent and Ashbel were amazed to see them inflate. When Qin Tian mentioned flying, Kent imagined using wings. Nick praised Qin Tian's inventions once again. Gaussen asked how high the balloons could fly, and Qin Tian said they could go high but not too high. Modern hot air balloons were made of reinforced nylon or polyester materials, which didn't exist in their time. To demonstrate how the hot air balloons worked, Qin Tian brought out a small model and lit a candle in its basket. Everyone else was impressed that it could fly, making Kent wonder if they could reach the gods with it. Qin Tian explained that they couldn't and suggested they not try to meet the gods either. Qin Tian glanced at a box and mentioned that there was one more essential thing for the hot air balloon riders. He explained how the parachute worked, in case they had an accident in the sky. This made the others worried, knowing they might have to jump from the air, which might lead to their death. Kent and Ashbel couldn't believe it when they grabbed their parachutes. Qin Tian told them to calm down because it was just their backup plan. He also handed them something he called a phone, which he made so they could talk while flying. Kent was amazed that he could hear Qin Tian's voice from far away with the phone. Ashbel joined in on the excitement and tried it out too. With their communication problem solved, Qin Tian told them to get ready to take off. The knights helped increase the wind power, and when they saw the balloon getting bigger, Qin Tian lit the burner. Everyone was shocked to see the basket start floating. Kent and Ashbel eagerly hopped into the first hot air balloon, and Qin Tian warned them to be careful. He and Nick also got into one, while Gaussen was urged to quickly get into another. Despite Qin Tian's warnings, Kent moved around the basket excitedly until a strong gust of wind made him hit his head on the edge. Meanwhile, Qin Tian noticed that Gaussen was actually afraid of heights. On the ground, Julian ordered the knights to follow him to the next town quickly. He promised to catch up with the others and praised Qin Tian for his remarkable skills. In the morning, Qin Tian and the others were still flying through the skies. They flew past clouds and saw birds flying below them. Qin Tian checked their progress using his makeshift phone. He noticed they were heading in the right direction according to the compass. However, Kent warned them they might encounter severe weather ahead. Kent closed his eyes and felt the wind's direction. He reassured Qin Tian that they would be okay for now. Ashbel wondered how long it would take to reach the front line. Qin Tian admitted he didn't know, which surprised Ashbel. Qin Tian said they might be faster than a carriage, but he couldn't promise anything because of the weather. Ashbel realized the hot air balloon was their only option. Kent suggested they might arrive early if the weather stayed favorable. Ashbel could only hope for the best. Despite having been on a plane before, Qin Tian couldn't help but enjoy the view in front of him. Suddenly, a system that hadn't been seen for a long time popped up and rewarded Qin Tian for making a hot air balloon. Qin Tian felt happy because it had been 2 years. However, he only received 6,000 points, which was 4,000 points less than what he needed to exchange for talents. Nick suddenly became worried that they were too high above the ground, which might make it difficult to meet Elin and the others. But Qin Tian remained hopeful that they would see them again soon. Just then, Kent informed them that their fuel was running low. As time passed, the group drifted along with the wind, their fuel slowly running out due to the heavy cargo they carried. Ashbel reminded everyone that they only had a quarter of the fuel left, prompting Qin Tian to decide to descend. As the flames died down, the hot air balloons gently descended near a town, luckily giving them a chance to refuel, which was part of Qin Tian's plan. He had anticipated towns along their route where they could restock. However, refueling took some time, and they only resumed flying in the afternoon. The second day wasn't smooth sailing. They encountered rain and ended up landing uncontrollably in a forest. Despite the challenges, they eventually reached the front lines on the last day without any major issues. Qin Tian instructed everyone to unload and set up camp upon landing quickly. Passers-by mistook their hot air balloons for angels, a nickname that stuck as people from the previous village followed them. Kent worried about transporting their belongings, but Qin Tian assured him they could ask people with carriages who were also searching for the angel for a ride. It didn't take them long to spot Wford City, a city built because of the war. It had tall stone walls that even cannons struggled to blast through. Qin Tian was surprised to see how prosperous the city looked, considering it was close to the front lines of the war. Kent reassured him, saying that the actual front lines were 2 days and nights away by horse. He also mentioned that there was a ceasefire between the two countries, allowing nearby towns to develop peacefully. Ashbel further explained that Wford City started small, but business guilds were attracted to its special geographical location, and it took hundreds of years for it to develop into what it was now. As the group waited in line with their carriage, some nobles' carriages ignored the line and entered the city ahead. Qin Tian felt jealous and wondered what rank of nobility could receive such treatment. Kent, feeling defensive as a noble himself, claimed that one would need to be at least an earl to get preferential treatment. In the city, people were busy rushing around. Among them, there was an old man who looked familiar. He thought he was running late. Roger felt stressed out because Dumbledore and William were searching for Kent. Dumbledore warned Roger about the serious consequences if they didn't meet the royal family's request on time. Roger suddenly noticed a lot of flies buzzing around and swatted at them. Dumbledore, puzzled, looked around for the flies. Roger joked if he smelled bad because the flies were hanging around him. Dumbledore then realized Roger meant him as the fly and tried to stay calm. He reminded Roger again of the consequences of the failed task. Just then, someone apologized and assured Dumbledore they arrived just in time. Kent and the others had just arrived, which surprised Dumbledore. Kent ignored Dumbledore and went to greet Roger first, who wondered if they had encountered an accident. Kent admitted they'd been ambushed, but assured that the supplies were safe. William was shocked since he'd seen the carriage burn to ashes. Angered, Dumbledore asked William for an explanation. William assumed Kent had just come with an empty box as a trick. Dumbledore then realized it would take a long time for Kent to arrive if he had a lot of goods with them. They were excited to see Kent embarrassed with his empty box. A man named Zidane then came over to check on Kent's supplies. He ordered his men to open and inspect the boxes. Dumbledore and William were excited to see what would happen, assuming the boxes were empty. However, Zidane immediately looked away after glancing once at the boxes. Ashbel then wondered why Dumbledore looked uncomfortable. She sarcastically assumed Dumbledore was worried for Kent, but assured him the goods were delivered as intended. Dumbledore was shocked to see the boxes full of supplies. His knees went weak, and Ashbel sarcastically assumed Dumbledore was relieved that the task was successfully completed. Qin Tian found Ashbel's sarcasm scary. Dumbledore had the worst headache ever, but William reminded him they still had the bracelet. Dumbledore then realized the bracelet could save them from the Lord's anger. Suddenly, Zidane scolded him and reminded him of his manners as a noble. Embarrassed, Dumbledore and William excused themselves. Seeing this, Qin Tian realized Zidane was a higher-ranking noble. Zidane then told Kent to move the goods in and sign the papers. He also invited them to Duke de Quill's birthday party in 2 days. After Kent thanked him, Qin Tian asked who de Quill was. Kent explained that de Quill owned the city, was one of the 27 dukes, and was part of the royal family. Ashbel grumbled about spending money on gifts again. Qin Tian suggested not going, but Kent said they should since they were invited. Ashbel told Qin Tian to just go to the party for the food and wine. Shortly after, the group arrived at an inn, and Kent realized they had run out of money. Ashbel explained that the expenses for the hot air balloon had been high. Staying at an inn caught Qin Tian's interest. Kent secured some rooms, and they all agreed to stay for 2 days before the Duke's birthday. During that time, they busied themselves buying dresses and gifts. Roger, who disliked parties, departed the city with the other sailors. 2 days later, the group set off for the party. It was nighttime, but the streets were illuminated by candles usually reserved for autumn and winter. Qin Tian worried they were running late, but Kent reassured him that the party wouldn't start until dawn. As they traveled, another carriage passed by with a familiar name, Dawn. As they entered the castle, Qin Tian commented that it was basically a fortress, not a castle. Kent explained that the place would be the final defense for the residents if the outer walls were breached. Seeing a lot of people coming in with them, Kent was relieved that they were not late at all. Ashbel told Qin Tian to eat what they spended by eating lots of meats and not breads. Qin Tian then held Nick's hand as a partner, and everyone went inside the reception. Ashbel quickly suggested to eat, and with Kent's words of approval, she went running to the buffet. As he ate, Qin Tian wondered what was in the second floor. Kent explained that those with the Earl title can go, but ladies with not title requirements could also visit the second floor. Just then, people started crowding, and Qin Tian wondered if a big shot visited. Ashbel claimed it was someone beautiful lady. However, Qin Tian looked uninterested and continued eating. Suddenly, we see a familiar long pink hair. It was Elin, dressed as a noble lady. Kent and Ashbel were at awe and decided to tell Qin Tian later. As a fellow guard, Gossen could feel that Pohama, the one acting as Ellen's bodyguard, was a strong person. Everyone around them were curious about Elin. Everyone then recognized Elin as the newly appointed Viscountess as she went to the second floor. Suddenly, someone greeted her and asked if he could sit near the legendary Viscountess. He introduced himself as Marquis Shattuck. Elin bluntly asked what he needed. Shattuck wondered if he could discuss something with her. Meanwhile, Kent and the others regrouped with Qin Tian, and Ashbel told him that it was a pity he didn't see a beauty. Qin Tian still looked uninterested despite Ashbel and Kent's interest in the new Viscountess's beauty and cooperation. Ashbel explained that the new Viscountess founded the Dawn Chamber of Commerce, which became famous, and within a year, she was promoted from a commoner to a Viscountess. Shocked, Qin Tian asked if Ashbel really said Dawn Chamber of Commerce and asked what was the Viscountess' name. Ashbel claimed it was Elin, and Qin Tian started running off along with Nick. On the other hand, Shattuck presented Elin a business contract. Elin heard that he was acquiring business associations left and right and didn't expect to be also targeted by him. However, creating the Dawn Chamber of Commerce's real purpose was to look for Qin Tian, and Elin would even offend a Marquis for that. Elin refused to work with Shattuck, but the Marquis still wanted to propose more terms just to get her cooperation. He claimed he knew that Elin was looking for someone and offered his full assistance on the search. Despite his men being busy with war, he offered to lend some help and threatened Elin to agree. He wanted the full income of the commerce as he search of the missing person, and Elin doesn't even mind handing over the whole commerce she made. Shattuck could feel how important the missing person to Elin was. Elin claimed that as a partner, she would do her best to find the important person to her. Suddenly, someone shouted Elin's name, which she quickly recognized. Elin and Pohama glanced back, and Elin's eyes welled up with tears. She embraced Qin Tian tightly, relieved to see him after such a long absence. They both expressed how much they had missed each other. Kent was taken aback to realize that Elin was the person Qin Tian had been searching for. Ashbel saw an opportunity for cooperation with the Dawn Chamber of Commerce. Shattuck then inquired about Qin Tian's identity. Elin apologized, saying she needed time to consider their agreement. Shattuck looked disappointed and decided to leave them alone. Shortly after, Duke de Quille arrived, and everyone welcomed him warmly. Shattuck approached him to offer his greetings. Suddenly, Nick sneezed and complained about an odd smell coming from Shattuck. Elin asked about Qin Tian's well-being, and Qin Tian explained that he had been with Nick the entire time. People began presenting lavish gifts to de Quille, particularly Kent. Qin Tian thanked Kent for facilitating his reunion with Elin. Kent had presented de Quille with something crafted from wood. When de Quille saw it, he wasn't impressed, and the other nobles also didn't like Kent's gift. Even Dumbledore spoke up, saying it was embarrassing for the Duke to receive just a piece of wood. Elin got worried, but Qin Tian reassured her that he had already talked to Kent about it. Kent explained that he had found the item washed up from the sea and had initially thought it was useless. But he claimed that through it, he could see a beautiful scene of flowers. The other nobles thought Kent's claims were ridiculous. Still, Kent asked de Quille to try the kaleidoscope he had made, swearing it was worth it. He gave the Duke some instructions on how to use it, and de Quille was amazed by what he saw through the gift. Impressed, de Quille apologized and approved of Kent's gift, so the Duke happily promoted Kent to Viscount without hesitation. Kent was of course delighted by the promotion. The Duke asked the others to continue the banquet while he spoke with Kent alone. This made Shattuck furious. The celebration kept going with Kent sitting next to the Duke. Qin Tian then got curious about what gift Elin brought. Surprisingly, it was soap, and Qin Tian asked if it was special. But it turned out to be just regular soap made using Qin Tian's method. Elin told him to wait and see. Then it was Shattuck's turn to give gifts to the Duke. Elin explained that Shattuck was someone important, and it could cause trouble if they offended him later. The Duke was happy to receive a beautiful bracelet from Shattuck. Qin Tian noticed it had the same pattern as the Wufang ring. Elin said they found the same bracelet on a sunken ship in her land, but it was all cracked and didn't react anymore. She also said the Wufang ring was broken. Qin Tian was okay with it as long as they had clues from the lab, but he still wondered how the Wufang ring broke, considering its special material. Elin didn't know why, but when they reached the Sacred West Kingdom, the ring suddenly activated on its own. She tried to check it, but it didn't respond. Qin Tian thought maybe its energy ran out, even though Zhang Feng said it could last another 100 years. Pohama went to deliver the gift to the Duke and presented it as their new product that would leave fragrance on the body once used. When de Quille reacted, Qin Tian asked if soap was popular in the kingdom. Elin then explained that Jessica had researched the kingdom's history, and found out that the culture was similar to Europe during the Age of Discovery. Jessica also guessed that the people in the kingdom were from a different era, like the Mayans. Elin remembered that European nobility during that era didn't care much about personal hygiene. Qin Tian understood how they targeted the potential market, but worried about their adaptability since he knew it took decades in Europe. Elin said they just advertised it, and Jessica did a great job. They managed to attract the attention of the nobility with toiletries, and soap became one of their main businesses now. Qin Tian praised Elin for her hard work, and she was happy to hear his praise. The celebration had ended, and everyone left. Outside, a bird's familiar screech echoed. Qin Tian was surprised to see the sand eagle doing well. They rode their carriage back to the inn and decided to rest for the day. In Qin Tian's room, Elin said everyone had been searching for Qin Tian for the past 2 years. Qin Tian wondered how everyone had been and asked how they got to the kingdom. Elin explained they sailed across the seas after hearing they were okay from a message through the Wufang ring. They guessed Qin Tian and Nick might have been stranded somewhere. Elin went to the Sacred West Kingdom to find them while Jessica searched the nearby seas. Since they spent a lot of money looking for the two, they decided to buy a big house and started their own business group. Qin Tian jokingly called Elin a viscount, and Elin said it was Jessica's idea. Their business of selling soap caught the attention of some rich folks, so they spent a bunch of money to become viscounts and own some land. But being nobles meant they had duties, so Elin came to the Duke's party. Qin Tian complimented Elin for working hard, but Elin said it was actually Qin Tian who had it tough. Meanwhile, Shattuck met Dumbledore in his office and criticized him for not handling a simple baron properly. Dumbledore tried to make excuses, but Shattuck didn't want to hear any more. Suddenly, a masked man appeared with a sword, and Dumbledore begged for another chance, promising to get rid of Kent within a month. Shattuck knew Dumbledore was skilled, but he still had doubts. He decided to give him some knights to help, and demanded to hear news of Kent's death within a week, either from Dumbledore himself or through other means. Dumbledore swore to complete the mission, even if it meant risking his life. After Dumbledore left, Shattuck wondered if the masked person had something to say. The masked person questioned why Shattuck had given Dumbledore a second chance and sent knights for just a baron. Shattuck explained that Kent had recently become a viscount and had caught the attention of the Duke, indicating something suspicious. As for giving Dumbledore another chance, it was merely to divert suspicion away from themselves. The masked person then asked about what to do with the Daybreak Association by Elin. Shattuck told him not to worry, as once he had his target in sight, they wouldn't be able to escape his grasp. Meanwhile, Elin was shocked to find out that Qin Tian and Nick had been in Iceland. She remembered they had plans to visit nearby islands, but Iceland was the last place on their list because it was very far from their kingdom. The idea of not seeing Qin Tian again made her cry, and she held him even closer. The next morning, Elin officially met Kent and his group. She thanked him for looking after Qin Tian, and Qin Tian also expressed his gratitude to Kent for letting him join them. He hinted that he might leave Kent's merchant guild soon. Ashbel also thanked Qin Tian for saving their lives at sea. Qin Tian felt sorry that Kent's title from the kaleidoscope didn't come with any real rewards. But then, Kate disagreed, and Julian arrived with a box full of golden treasures. It was a gift from the Duke. Qin Tian was happy and told Kent that he would become a stronger noble eventually, but he doubted that Dequil supported Kent financially to confront Dumbledore. Then Ashbel pushed a box forward, lending it to Qin Tian. Qin Tian thought they should have it, but Ashbel reminded him they got it thanks to his kaleidoscope. Qin Tian suggested making a contract because he knew Ashbel loved money and would add interest. Ashbel was happy thinking about the money he would get back. Kent said only Shattuck's bracelet was as good as the kaleidoscope and wondered where he had seen it before. Ashbel reminded him it was in Dumbledore's office, taken from a tomb on the edge of Kent's territory. Qin Tian guessed the tomb was a laboratory. Elin called out to Qin Tian about her concern, which he already knew, but they couldn't investigate because it was Dumbledore's territory. He suggested making plans first, mentioning the sunken ship in Elin's territory. Qin Tian and Elin said goodbye to Kent and his group. As they traveled, Nick and Pohama drove the carriage. Qin Tian wondered if Jessica was nearby. Elin explained that Jessica had taken the Dawn to Nezar Island to search for Qin Tian and would return in a week if she found nothing. Qin Tian worried about Jessica's safety, but Elin reassured him that Kata, her bodyguard, was always with her. Suddenly, San Eagle began screeching, and Qin Tian asked Pohama to stop. He said San Eagle was warning them that armed people were following Kent and the others. While Kent and the others were journeying back home, Jelaine and his knights were once again accompanying them, knowing that the journey might not be peaceful. Kent thought about using hot air balloons, but the wind wasn't blowing in the right direction. Still, he thought it would be a good idea to teach the knights how to use them later. Suddenly, loud noises erupted from behind, and Jelaine hurried to investigate. Armored cavalry were charging toward them, prompting Jelaine to order everyone to protect Kent. The two groups began exchanging gunfire. Gaussen suggested dropping the gold to distract the attackers, but Ashbel argued that Kent was the attackers' main target. Kent offered to lure the enemies away, but Ashbel insisted he should escape with Jelaine. However, their carriage hit a large rock and overturned. The carriage crashed, and Kent and Ashbel got hurt inside. Ashbel told Kent to hurry and escape. Gaussen tried to help Kent out, but an enemy was already rushing toward them. Surprisingly, an arrow shot the enemy, and Gaussen wondered what had happened. They then saw Qin Tian's group coming to help them, but they worried about being outnumbered by enemies. Qin Tian lit up some grenades and threw them towards the enemies to mess up their formation. When their carriage arrived, Qin Tian jumped off and began attacking the enemy knights with his bare hands. He used his thunderous speed to knock out the enemies one by one. Once again, Jelaine was amazed by Qin Tian's incredible strength. Kent then told Jelaine and his knights to assist Qin Tian. The enemies started running away in fear, calling Qin Tian a devil. Later, Kent pondered how Qin Tian's group had ended up in the area. Qin Tian simply explained that they had noticed armed men heading towards Kent's direction. Ashbel and Jelaine thanked Kent once again for saving them. Kent thought about how he could express his gratitude to Qin Tian once more. Qin Tian mentioned that he also had some business in Moso City. He wondered what Shattuck was after, seeing his knights attacking Kent. Qin Tian then shared with Ellen his surprise at seeing her carriage loaded with bombs and guns. Ellen explained that the kingdom's security wasn't as strong as it appeared. However, their recent encounter had depleted their ammunition. Qin Tian reassured them not to worry, as the attackers wouldn't quickly return since they had suffered heavy losses in men and horses. Hiding in the forest, Dumbledore couldn't help but curse upon witnessing the failed ambush. He angrily demanded why they had fled when they had hundreds of armed men. He commanded William to prepare for an attack within an hour. Despite William suggesting they rest first, Dumbledore became even angrier. William ignored Dumbledore and ordered their men to retreat. He reminded Dumbledore that they were loyal to Shattuck and would truthfully report the failed attack. He warned Dumbledore that he was just a pawn and wouldn't hesitate to remove him. This made Dumbledore realize his own position. Shattuck received the report of the failed attack, and Kent's return to Moso City. He understood that small traps wouldn't catch his prey and decided to go all out. He ordered all his troops to attack Moso City. The captain was concerned that the royal family would find out about the attack. Shattuck instructed the captain to keep Aelin and Kent trapped inside the city to prevent any communication outside. Without the royal family's knowledge, they could eliminate the two, and if the event was investigated, the blame would be pinned on Dumbledore since a pawn still had to play his role. Shortly after, Kent received reports that the towns of Polka and Valen had been attacked. It was the fourth report of such attacks, and Kent realized that his villages were under assault. Qin Tian approached, asking what was happening. Ashbel explained that armed troops were attacking villages within Kent's territory. Gaussen suggested that Kent was the real target and advised him to escape early to avoid certain death. Qin Tian asked for their plan. Kent stated they would rescue the remaining villagers and instructed Qin Tian to flee with Aelin using hot air balloons, as Moso City was already surrounded, likely by Dumbledore to cut off their contact with others. Qin Tian speculated that the knights who first attacked them were soldiers of Shattuck, assuming an alliance between the two. He believed Shattuck wanted to eliminate Kent since he had been promoted to a viscount. Kent resolved to stand his ground and evacuate his people. Qin Tian reassured them, suggesting a way to win by preventing the enemy from surrounding them and keeping their situation hidden. Ashbel proposed informing the royal family about the unjust attack using a hot air balloon, but Gaussen disagreed, fearing it would expose them to Dumbledore's forces. Qin Tian sided with Gaussen, advocating for gathering troops and breaking through the enemy lines as soon as possible. Kent, however, worried about the safety of the remaining villagers. Qin Tian warned that if they didn't act, more than just the villagers would be sacrificed. Kent felt a chill of fear, unsure of what to do next. Kent had assumed they could still be fast in rescuing the villagers and break out of the area. Qin Tian agreed with this idea. Kent then told Jelaine to rescue as many villagers as possible. Jelaine instructed his men to gather adult men to defend the city. The next morning, Jelaine and the other knights returned after rescuing some villagers. Kent's musketeers started firing gunshots at the knights who were chasing Jelaine and his men. They safely made it back inside Moso City, and the villagers thanked them. Kent asked about Gelaine's condition, and Jelaine was fine except for some casualties along the way. Kent blamed himself for not listening to Qin Tian's advice. Qin Tian reminded him that a leader should stay calm or their side would collapse. Kent now realized that he had to act as a resolute leader. Shortly after, enemy troops besieged the walls of Moso City. The general was aware that Shattuck had mobilized 3,000 soldiers for this operation, but he believed only half were necessary to overcome Moso City's defenses due to their siege cannons. They also brought a battering ram to breach the city gates. As the enemies closed in, Ashbel ordered the dropping of the whale oil they had. The battering ram was soaked in whale oil, and burning arrows began to rain down from the city defenses. Despite this, the battering ram persisted until it finally smashed through the gates, allowing enemy soldiers to charge into the city. From a distance, Dumbledore felt satisfaction knowing that Kent's demise was imminent. However, the general cautioned Dumbledore against celebrating prematurely, emphasizing the importance of occupying the city first. Meanwhile, within the city walls, swords clashed as soldiers fought, with Nick joining the fray. Kent urged everyone to stand firm. He exclaimed they would win soon. Suddenly, a bullet grazed him, but Gaussen managed to save him from falling. He told him to leave, but Kent was determined to stay until Qin Tian arrived. As the battle outside continued, Qin Tian and Lin were busy working on something that could change the course of the war. Qin Tian successfully created nitroglycerin. He packed up everything and told Lin to stay inside, asking her to wait for him. Lin told him to be careful. The war raged on until the enemy general could see that the city had been completely breached. He then ordered his men to occupy the city, and gunmen started shooting toward the castle walls. Kent's knights appeared to hold back the enemy soldiers, while Gaussen picked up Kent and started running away. Out of the blue, there was an explosion near the city where the enemy soldiers were stationed. They were puzzled, thinking it might be a fire from within. Dumbledore, a soldier, declared it wasn't an ordinary bomb they faced. Then, a soldier spotted an eagle before another explosion rocked the area. Turns out it was a sand eagle carrying bottles of nitroglycerin. It deftly avoided the bullets aimed at it and timed the release of the bottles perfectly. Explosions erupted among the enemy ranks, causing the advancing soldiers to panic and retreat. Kent's soldiers were relieved that they emerged victorious from the skirmish. Kent was bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Qin Tian appeared, inquiring about any casualties. Kent asked if Qin Tian was responsible for the explosions, to which he admitted using nitroglycerin. Concerned for Kent's well-being, Qin Tian urged him to rest while he took charge, and so the first battle came to an end. Qin Tian had laid out a map, explaining that there were still threats and that enemies might launch another attack soon. Kent insisted they could win with bombs, but Qin Tian pointed out they'd already used up the materials. Kent then asked what Qin Tian needed. Qin Tian started listing some regions, which was hard for the others to understand. However, Gaussen knew that alchemists should have such things. Kent told him to hurry, but Gaussen claimed they didn't have any alchemists in Moso City. Suddenly, Jelaine appeared, saying there were people looking for Kent. He said they weren't Dumbledore's men, but some aristocrats. Ashbel agreed to check since they couldn't violate the rules of aristocracy. Kent and the others went out to see who it was, and they found a loud old man looking for him. He exclaimed that a mere baron shouldn't possess any ultramarine and ordered him to hand over the precious pigments. Kent wondered what he meant. The old man called him blasphemous for using ultramarine for mere posters. Qin Tian had exclaimed that they were currently in a state of war with someone and asked the old man whose side he was on. The old man became angry, calling them barbarians for not offering good hospitality. Bakuma then accidentally fired the arrow she had been holding back, surprising the old man and his men. Kent then instructed Qin Tian and Bakuma to hold back, as he recognized the old man as Romany Burney, which was quickly confirmed by the old man's attendant. Gaussen remembered that Romany was a famous painter respected even by the royal family, as his work included the portrait of the Virgin Mary in the cathedral. Qin Tian was shocked by the extent of the old man's influence. Romany's attendant explained that Kent and the others had mistaken them for Dumbledore's men. Marshall introduced himself and stated that they meant no harm, but had only come with Romany to visit Kent. Qin Tian apologized and offered ultramarine as compensation for the misunderstanding. The old painter became excited upon hearing that he would receive everything after a banquet was served. However, Marshall warned the old man about an impending attack. Romany claimed it was merely a misunderstanding, but Marshall offered to retrieve it for him instead. Romany stated he would need a lot, knowing that Marshall's men were occupied with war preparations. He told Marshall to step back if he wished and promised to finish the portrait Marshall's father had requested. Marshall then instructed his men to remain outside and inform his father if Romany didn't emerge after some time. He didn't want to take risks, but their family would suffer if something happened to Romany. Elin wondered if Qin Tian had a plan. Ashbel assumed that Qin Tian would leverage Romany's influence to make Dumbledore's men retreat. Qin Tian claimed Romany didn't have that much power, but he could still be useful in gaining the resources they were looking for. Kent and Qin Tian had welcomed Romany warmly, inviting him to wait while they prepared a banquet. Romany appreciated their kindness, but he wasn't hungry for food, he was after ultramarine pigments. Qin Tian reminded Romany that they were in the midst of war, and getting ultramarine would come with conditions. Romany understood the situation and asked what they needed in return. Kent suggested that Romany transport some supplies for them, but Romany refused to carry weapons because of a secret deal he had with Dumbledore, as long as he got what he wanted in return. However, he hinted that there was a third high-ranking power behind the attack. Qin Tian picked up on his hint and then asked if Romany knew any alchemists. Romany was given a list of ingredients, which he noticed weren't meant for warfare. He then inquired about how much ultramarine he could acquire, initially asking for 1 kilogram. Qin Tian confidently offered 2 kilograms, despite the high cost. However, Romany and Marshall were skeptical. Suddenly, Ashbel appeared with a small amount of ultramarine. Romany promised to deliver what they requested as soon as possible. Romany and Marshall had just returned outside, and the old man began telling their men to gather some things. As their carriage passed by Dumbledore's camp, Marshall said they'd demand more later. Dumbledore objected, saying it wasn't part of the agreement, but Marshall insisted they'd keep his business private. Dumbledore reluctantly let the carriage pass, feeling uneasy. The general reassured Dumbledore, saying Romany and Marshall were small players compared to Shadak, though a bit more significant. He suspected they might cause trouble soon and proposed attacking Moso City in 2 days. As night fell, Kent told the others to wait until Romany came back. Gaussen worried that Dumbledore's forces had a lot of weapons and arrows, and they might not last long. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city walls, arrows flew, taking down some knights. Rogue-like men stealthily climbed the walls to open the city gates, but Qin Tian and some gunmen were already prepared for their nighttime attack. The knights nearby got alerted and began defending against the enemies who were raiding at night. Gaussen told them to sound the alarm, and even the enemy soldiers outside heard the loud bell ringing. The enemy general ordered their troops to retreat. Dumbledore was shocked because he thought they would capture the city that night. The general then pointed out how the city seemed unguarded the other day, yet they still lost many men and supplies. He advised Dumbledore to be patient because he had a plan to recruit nearby nobles using Shadak's name. Kent was surprised that the night raid ended earlier than expected. Ashbel angrily said it was a good thing. Qin Tian was amazed that Dumbledore retreated so easily when they could easily take over the city with their numbers. He hoped Romany would return soon. He had already rushed the production of hot air balloons, but they still weren't enough. The following day, Kent and Qin Tian waited nervously, hoping for a positive outcome. Dumbledore's group encountered trouble from Romany's gang again. When Dumbledore inspected the cart they were transporting, Marshall requested to see its contents. Upon observing the strange assortment of items, Dumbledore inquired about their purpose. Romany insisted that it was none of Dumbledore's business and assured him that the items were not illegal. Eventually, Dumbledore agreed to let them pass, and the cart proceeded safely. Excitedly, Romany asked for the ultramarine, but Kent informed him that it was still being retrieved from a secure location. Romany acknowledged that it wasn't kept at the manor due to its value. Ashbel kindly offered dinner while they waited for the ultramarine, which Romany eagerly accepted. Meanwhile, Qin Tian was relieved that they now had enough nitroglycerin. Elin expressed concern about the ultramarine, as it would take some time to mix it. Qin Tian reassured her that they hadn't promised Romany immediate access to the ultramarine in the first place. Qin Tian had come out with Elin and declared that it was time for their counterattack. Soldiers gathered around, and Qin Tian boosted their morale by saying they would win. Everyone cheered and Ashbel prayed. Nick and Elin reassured Ashbel calmly that they would win with Qin Tian leading them. Soldiers, led by Qin Tian, then started pouring out of the city. Meanwhile, Dumbledore felt restless as he did nothing while waiting for the general to return. Just then, they heard whistling sounds outside their tents. William went out to check and was shocked to find bottles dropped by Sand Eagle. Explosions scattered across their camp. Qin Tian also got additional gifts for them and fired off arrows with nitroglycerin. Explosions happened around Dumbledore's camp. Qin Tian and the others rushed toward the camp, and Pokuma noticed William dead. Seeing him, Qin Tian assumed that Dumbledore was nearby. Gaussen flipped out a nearby tent and found a dead Dumbledore with a dumb look on his face. Jelaine ran to regroup with Qin Tian and said there were casualties on their side. He asked for orders to pursue the remaining enemies who were escaping, but Qin Tian said not to chase too far. He wanted to be cautious because Shadak was still alive. He reminded them that the enemy might come back stronger if they regrouped. Then he ordered some men to travel quickly and inform the royal family about what happened. It would take a week for the news to reach them, and Qin Tian hoped they would make it in time. Qin Tian and the others soon returned victorious. He offered Romini 2,000 kilograms of ultramarine if he agreed to wait, but the old man only wanted 1,000 within the day. Qin Tian said it would still take a day since it was being retrieved from a distant location. Romini exclaimed that the city would be wiped out by Dumbledore by that time. Qin Tian asked him not to worry and said the battle was over since Dumbledore was already dead. In the morning, Romini brought up his request again. He was surprised to learn that Kent had won the battle, despite being outnumbered and less powerful, and had even managed to murder Dumbledore. Feeling uncertain, Qin Tian called in some people. Soldiers pointed their guns at Romini's group. The old man reminded them that he had recently been invited by Marcus, the father of the marshal, to paint. He said the Painters Association wouldn't stay silent if anything happened to him. Qin Tian said he had nothing to fear anymore and joked about going to heaven if he died alongside a master like Romini. Marshal told the old man to calm down, knowing Qin Tian was just joking. Qin Tian wondered why Marshal thought he was joking. Marshal said Qin Tian didn't seem like a harsh person, otherwise he would have harmed them from the start. Qin Tian noticed Marshal's trembling hand and promised not to harm them while they were in the city. He said he would send them off once the ultramarine they needed was ready. He asked them to wait a bit longer, but the old man was eager to leave. Qin Tian asked them to wait a few days and then escorted Romini's group somewhere. Gaussen suggested murdering them and throwing their bodies on the battlefield. Qin Tian also agreed to just directly give the ultramarine. Kent was tired of deceiving someone. Ashbel was worried about acquiring the amount of ultramarine they needed. Elin laughed and asked Qin Tian to do something to prevent them from collapsing. Kent wondered if Qin Tian could really get ultramarine, and Qin Tian asked him to chill since he still had some steps to complete. Making ultramarine involved 3 major steps. First, they needed to dry some reagents that they obtained from Romini himself. Next was to grind and mix everything at high temperatures for a long time. Since the next step would be done the next day, Qin Tian and the others focused first on the city's defenses. Kent just hoped there would be no second night attack. Qin Tian was confident that no one would dare after experiencing the power of nitroglycerin. However, torches started appearing in the nearby woods, implying that a force was lurking nearby. They were soldiers gathered by the enemy General Clinton to support Dumbledore. But when they arrived at Dumbledore's camp, they were shocked to see scattered dead soldiers everywhere. Panic spread, and Clinton demanded to know what happened. He ordered torches to be lit, revealing craters that made them wonder if the ammo depots exploded. The soldiers' deaths were gruesome and unheroic. Clinton felt anxious because he knew where the real ammo depot was and the number of craters didn't match up. He suspected it was a counterattack from Moso City, so he decided to retreat despite complaints from his soldiers about traveling so far for nothing. Clinton didn't care anymore and canceled their previous agreements. With their small numbers, they couldn't take down Moso City. He planned to inform Shadak about the situation. Meanwhile, Qin Tian and others were almost finished making ultramarine by cooling down heated mixed powders. 4 hours later, Kent and the others were amazed by the final product. They saw real alchemy done by Qin Tian, although it was slightly different from the usual. Qin Tian said only those keen with colors would notice the slight difference, but it should be acceptable for Romini. Romini had just laid eyes on the ultramarine and was taken aback by the sheer quantity of it. He looked as if he had stumbled upon the find of a lifetime. Gaussen proceeded to explain that ultramarine held great value and was highly revered in Holy Madonna Maria. Ashbel added that even expert painters would abandon their cherished artworks because they couldn't obtain enough ultramarine. He recounted the tale of a master named Reinhard who sold all his possessions to gather ultramarine but never completed his painting. Yelin remarked on Romini's enthusiasm, likening it to a painting waiting to be brought to life within him. Suddenly, an elderly man exclaimed that he needed to test the pigments immediately. Qin Tian nervously agreed, recognizing Romini's entitlement to do so. A canvas was swiftly prepared, and Romini began mixing the ultramarine. The others watched with bated breath until Romini declared that the color was incorrect. Qin Tian admitted he wasn't a painter and lacked Romini's discerning eye for color. Romini insisted on obtaining the authentic ultramarine despite Qin Tian's apology that it was all they had. To Romini's surprise, Qin Tian offered to double the amount available to him. He had offered it at double the price, and if Romini refused, their deal would be over. Finally, Qin Tian and the others bid farewell to Romini's group. Ashbel could smell the opportunity to make money with Qin Tian's ultramarine, but Kent reminded her that Qin Tian owned the recipe. Still, she felt excited about Qin Tian's method of turning stone into silver. However, Qin Tian had doubts. Yelin understood it was all about supply and demand. Qin Tian reminded everyone that only wealthy painters would buy ultramarine, so the market wasn't very big, but they could still make a profit by selling it right away. Ashbel was surprised, and Qin Tian said they needed many craftsmen and laborers. Ashbel thought it was for Moso City's soldiers and defenses, but Qin Tian clarified that he needed carpenters, blacksmiths, and a workshop. Yelin asked if he planned to make something, and Qin Tian suggested upgrading their weapons. He had been planning it because Moso City was isolated with no support, and they'd be in trouble if there was another attack. Since they couldn't make more weapons, they'd focus on improving quality. He also mentioned using nitroglycerin in smaller amounts for extra power. He could improve the guns they currently have for more firepower and reloading time. He told Kent and the others that they were defenseless against hidden enemies nearby. He said they couldn't fight back with their current numbers and suggested evacuating Moso City. Kent was surprised, and Qin Tian wondered if there might be a problem. Ashbel explained that leaving would look like surrender to the royal family. Kent worried that the people of Moso would end up homeless and doubted they would agree to leave their homes. Qin Tian suggested that as a lord, Kent should convince his people first. An hour later, Kent gathered the residents to hear their opinions. Everyone agreed, just as he expected. Most of them didn't want to leave their homes and were ready to fight alongside Kent in the war, so they began improving their weapons. Everyone pitched in to build trebuchets. Meanwhile, Ashbel spread the word for recruits using the merchants' channels, promising a big reward to gather more people quickly. After a week, they made 10 sets of trebuchets. They planned to use them to launch nitroglycerin for defense. Meanwhile, in Intigus, the second largest city on the front lines, Shattuck got a report from Clinton and wondered why he was still alive. Shattuck felt disappointed hearing no clues. Clinton then exclaimed that Moso City had a mysterious weapon with the power of multiple bombs. He said that's why they failed and suggested Shattuck could gain power if they got it. Shattuck remembered Kent also had the strange kaleidoscope and figured he might be hiding more than just the mysterious weapon. Suddenly, Clinton warned Shattuck to watch out as someone appeared behind him. Clinton suddenly let his guard down when he recognized the pattern on the letter's stamp delivered by the masked person. Shattuck read the letter and, after confirming the masked person wasn't an assassin, asked Clinton to step back. He also instructed to inform the presidents of the merchant associations to get the agreed gold ready within 3 days. Clinton inquired about what to do with Moso City, and Shattuck advised leaving them alone for a month. Shortly after, Moso City became bustling with craftsmen, managing to acquire many revolvers. However, the news of the front line being breached was shocking. Such an incident hadn't occurred after years of conflict between the two countries. Ashbel asked her sister if the news was true, and she confirmed that the recent delivery driver had verified it. Qin Tian observed their worry over the unexpected turn in the war. Nick wondered what had happened, and Qin Tian suddenly realized she couldn't understand English. Pokuma became concerned for their tribe, but Yelin reassured her that their city, Duranba, was far from the front lines. Qin Tian assumed that the royal family wouldn't remain inactive, and the breach in the line would only be temporary. Shortly after, Qin Tian went out to put together some revolvers. Kent and Gaussen wondered if there were longer weapons like they used to have. Ashbel worried about how far the bullets could reach and said it might put them at a disadvantage. Gaussen said rifles could shoot up to 80 meters. Qin Tian told him to watch closely. He aimed his revolver at a target and shot several times quickly. This surprised everyone there, and Gaussen was amazed at how fast the revolver could shoot. He said it would make their soldiers more powerful. Qin Tian warned them not to get too excited and offered to let them try it out. Qin Tian was able to hit all his shots because of his special skill. Everyone took turns trying out the revolvers, and Ellen kept track of how many hits they got, with Kent at the bottom of the list. Pokuma praised Qin Tian again for getting them good weapons, but Qin Tian said she was already strong enough. Pokuma still preferred using a bow and arrow, and Qin Tian agreed that the twins should stick with it. The day after, Ashbel received new information confirming the news from the previous day. It turned out that soldiers from the Empire had breached the kingdom's defense line through the gaps. What's more, the breach was right in line with Wford City vertically, and Duke de Quille was currently battling the invaders there. Kent hoped the Duke could fend off the enemy because Moso City would be the next target after Wford. Qin Tian advised Kent against relying too much on others and suggested focusing on getting stronger. He proposed seizing Dumbledore's territory now that he was dead and everyone was occupied with the Empire's attacks. Ashbel agreed with the idea, but worried that the royal family might reclaim Dumbledore's land once the conflict settled. Kent then asked Qin Tian about their next move if the kingdom managed to repel the Empire's forces. Ashbel suggested finding a good reason to take over Dumbledore's territory along with Kent's. Qin Tian then came up with a story about Dumbledore agreeing to sell his land to Kent, but then changing his mind and starting a war instead. In the end, Dumbledore lost and was murdered, but since there were no witnesses left alive, Qin Tian thought they should get Dumbledore's seal from his office to prove the agreement. Gaussen knew that Qin Tian had planned everything before the battle even began. Ashbel worried about who was behind the attack on Dumbledore. Qin Tian wondered why this mastermind hadn't done anything yet. Ilan thought maybe the mastermind was busy with something else, like the war. She guessed it might involve higher-ranked nobles, since they were all ordered to join the fighting by the royal family. Still, Qin Tian wasn't completely convinced and suggested Kent focus on getting stronger to protect his people. Soon, Qin Tian and the others traveled to Eford, where Dumbledore lived. But along the way, they noticed the villages looked deserted and abandoned for a long time. They wondered why, and Kent said only Dumbledore would know. That night, they finally reached Eford and paid 50 copper coins per person as a fee. Ashbel casually handed over the money, and the guards wished they had asked for more. As the group walked away, the guards slowly recognized them. Qin Tian was surprised that Ashbel willingly gave away money, but Ashbel, with his merchant spirit, planned to get it back after taking over Eford. Qin Tian noticed how poor Dumbledore's domain looked and understood why, despite having a higher rank, Dumbledore had the same power as Kent. They soon reached Dumbledore's residence. Ashbel and Kent quickly went over. Familiar with the guards tried to stop them, saying Dumbledore was away, but Ashbel brushed past, saying they were returning to their own castle. Colin, one of the guards, was confused, and Ashbel explained that Dumbledore had sold his fiefdom to them a month ago. Colin asked for documents, but Ashbel ignored him and asked him to gather the residents. Colin doubted their words but realized Dumbledore wouldn't easily kneel in front of Kent. Colin led them to Dumbledore's office. Ashbel asked him to open it, but Colin insisted they should, assuming they had received the keys from Dumbledore. Qin Tian suddenly walked to the door and kicked it hard, breaking it. He suggested changing the door, and everyone agreed. Kent asked the scared Colin to step back for now. Kent and the others entered Dumbledore's office. Ashbel remarked how well Kent fit into the place. Colin offered his help, but Ashbel tried to shoo him away. Colin wondered if Kate had gained control of Dumbledore's territory because of his new title as Viscount. Nonetheless, he was happy that Kent was taking over after hearing about Moso City's progress over the years. Gaussen volunteered to keep an eye on Colin for the time being. Kent felt anxious the whole time, pretending they had the necessary documents. Qin Tian reassured him, saying they only needed Dumbledore's seal. Ashbel immediately began searching for it and accidentally activated a hidden safe while rummaging through the bookshelves. They discovered a box, and Qin Tian suggested that Ashbel should be the one to open it based on his instincts. Sure enough, Ashbel managed to pick the lock and open the box in less than a minute. Ashbel tried to justify lockpicking as a handy skill for everyday life. Inside they found the seal, and they were relieved to secure new lands to protect Kent's people. Suddenly, they spotted a letter in the box. Qin Tian noticed a seal on it, and Ashbel recognized it as Shadak's seal. The letter contained orders from Shadak, directing Dumbledore to gather funds and attack Kent. They considered the possibility of someone more powerful than Dumbledore supporting him, but hadn't expected it to be Shadak. Qin Tian reassured everyone, saying not to worry because dealing with 100,000 troops armed with old flintlocks would be easy. Then Kent chimed in, telling Qin Tian to relax, explaining that the royal family wouldn't allow a duke to command such a massive army. They stumbled upon a map with markings. Qin Tian suggested they investigate the locations marked later. Kent noticed a strange manor outlined on the edge of his and Dumbledore's territories. Qin Tian then realized it must be where Dumbledore found the bracelet. He mentioned that the unfamiliar manor was actually underground, not on the surface. Under Dumbledore's leadership, Eford was in chaos and poverty due to high taxes, as reported by Colin. Ashbel and Kent quickly drew up documents to halt taxation temporarily and gather people to improve the area and make more revolvers. It didn't take long for the residents to hear about the change in leadership in Eford. They were thrilled by the news, but cleaning up the mess Dumbledore left behind would take time. After 3 days, the situation in Eford somehow stabilized, and Qin Tian and his group headed back to Moso City, knowing it wouldn't be good to be away for too long. However, Athena brought troubling news that Duke de Quil was trapped in Wford City, which was under heavy siege. The nobles on the front lines were defeated and fleeing for their lives. Athena was worried that if Wford City fell, Eford would be next. Gaussen said it would be tough to break through because they knew the royal family's army should stop them. Ashbel was worried they might also be sent to the front lines. Qin Tian was already tired of hearing such depressing news. He then asked about the progress of making revolvers. Athena said they found more smithies to make the parts and said that all soldiers could soon have the weapons. Qin Tian asked her to find more workshops since they needed at least 2,000 revolvers. Qin Tian assumed they could use soldiers from Eford, but they still wouldn't stand a chance against Shadak and his troops. Qin Tian wondered if there were financial issues, but Ashbel said there were none and they had enough funds for the guns. However, they wouldn't be able to afford the soldiers' pay even if they used up Kent's recent reward. Aelin told them not to worry since she could lend some money. She said she could lend 100,000 gold coins, which wasn't much for her business. Ashbel was shocked, saying 10,000 was enough, and Kent suddenly felt poor as a viscount. With just 10,000, Aelin said they could gather the amount from nearby stores without going to headquarters. Ashbel and Kent were grateful for her financial support. Qin Tian had asked Athena about the nobles selling off their assets. Athena confirmed that most nobles were selling whatever they could before their domain got affected by the war. Qin Tian could see that the nobles were just running away and wondered if the royal family would get mad. Ashbel explained that it was indeed leading to a chopping block, but not putting the assets on active sale was permissible. She claimed the nobles might sell off what they had, but they wouldn't immediately leave their territory. Qin Tian suddenly thought of something and suggested buying them while the prices were low. He also assumed that these nobles had military supplies. Soon after, in Yukos, another frontline city, Count Jinute sighed as he was only able to monetize a tenth to a fifth of his assets. He was stressed about finding a buyer. Suddenly, his attendant came over and reported that Viscount Kent was visiting. However, Jinute didn't recognize the name. Kent and the others entered his office, and Jinute asked for their business since he was in a rush to liquidate his assets. Kent then claimed he came to acquire some supplies from him, like military supplies and other things like food and horses. Jinute got excited and ordered his attendant to prepare a banquet and discuss things over a meal. The Count had a lot of money, and he and Kent talked about it for hours. Eventually, they made a deal, and Jinute promised to deliver everything in a month. Ashbel was relieved that things went well. Jinute was happy to have a buyer, even though he had to sell at a lower price, because he got rid of all his assets at once. But his helper was worried because Kent knew about the asset sales despite the ongoing war. Jinute remembered Kent from de Quill's party and thought he seemed like someone with a plan. However, they had already signed an agreement, so Jinute couldn't back out now. A week later, Ashbel said they had collected a lot of assets and wondered what to do next. Qin Tian suggested finding more nobles. Kent said they had enough supplies for 5,000 soldiers per month, but Qin Tian thought it wasn't enough. He thought Moso City would be on the defensive and they needed enough provisions to withstand a siege. The group visited another noble on Jinute's recommendation but didn't expect to see Shadak there too. Count Franco was surprised to have two parties visiting for the same reasons. Shattuck was happy to see Kent and Elin and was surprised that Franco knew them. Elin tried to leave because Franco had another visitor, but Franco wanted them to stay. In the end, Elin insisted they didn't want to intrude, and Franco gave in. Later, at an inn, Ashbel had been talking badly about Shattuck and suggested that Gosen should have murdered him right there. Kent explained that if they had done that, they would have been caught and wiped out by Shattuck's guards. Kent wondered why Shattuck was also buying assets. Elin guessed that, like Kent, Shattuck must also be unwilling to leave his city and was getting ready for a battle instead. The group soon left to find more nobles using a different route, knowing they might run into Shattuck along the way. However, most of the nobles they met had already sold their assets to Shattuck. No matter how they adjusted their route, they kept bumping into Shattuck by chance. Shattuck said it was God's will and asked the host noble for some private time to talk with Kent and Elin. Shattuck wondered why they were buying lots of supplies. Elin asked the same, and Shattuck said they must have the same goal of fighting back against the imperial troops. He criticized most of the nobles for being cowardly, running away after selling their wealth, but he assumed Kent and Elin were different, wanting to fight the invaders since they were stocking up on supplies. Elin then casually challenged Shattuck to guess their purpose. She had told him to think it over as she excused herself. Half a month later, Qin Tian could see that Moso City had improved its defenses and weapons, but they still needed more people for offense. Kent said that people were still moving from Eford to Moso, and they had already enlisted over 200,000 soldiers. Qin Tian told him to keep recruiting, and he and Elin would cover the costs. Kent thanked Qin Tian, who reminded him it wasn't for free, and he would need people to help excavate the ruins later. Just then, they noticed Ghislaine and his men returning. The mission was successful, but it took the royal family a while to handle it because of the ongoing war with the Empire. With Moso City stable now, they had nothing to fear. Soon after, they heard that Shattuck sent troops to support Dequil, but got defeated. Days later, they learned that Shattuck was also defeated and trapped in Wford City. Many nobles in the front line fought briefly then fled. Imperial troops took over the hills where nobles used to relax, turning the residents into refugees. Kent didn't want the same thing to happen to Moso City. Kent had seemed strong earlier, but he suddenly felt weak when caught in a snowstorm. Pokuma remembered how her tribe struggled with winter when they ended up in a different world. Kent wondered if the Imperial army would keep marching despite the bad weather. Gosen said they would because time was crucial. He then explained why the Imperial army didn't capture Wford City. Qin Tian realized they were taking calculated risks. Since Kent was confused, Qin Tian explained that the Empire knew the kingdom's lords were scattered, so their army could easily move through the lands. However, Qin Tian was confident the Empire wouldn't win, despite appearing to be in a good position. Gosen disagreed, saying the Empire was winning to some extent. Qin Tian asked what he meant. Gosen explained that the royal family would receive news slowly, giving the Empire time to take over places like Moso City in the south. However, he thought things could change if Dequil got reinforcements and fought back. Qin Tian was curious about Gosen's past job that gave him such insights. Gosen said he was just a wandering warrior in the past, but Qin Tian still had doubts. In the end, he respected Gosen's privacy. The next morning, after covering their tracks, Qin Tian and the others continued to monitor the approaching troops.